You open your credit score app the way you do every month, out of habit more than curiosity at this point. Your number moved down 11 points. You stare at it for a second, trying to figure out why. You didn't miss a payment, you didn't open a new card, nothing dramatic happened, but the number moved anyway, and you genuinely have no idea what caused it. So you do what most people do. You guess. Maybe it was that balance you carried last month. Maybe it's because you checked your score too many times. Maybe closing that old card a while back finally caught up with you. You're not actually sure because nobody ever sat you down and explained in plain language what actually moves this number. You've just been operating on a mix of things you've heard from friends, family, and vague internet advice for years. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people manage their credit based on myths, not the actual formula behind the score. And some of those myths aren't just slightly off. They're actively costing people points, sometimes significant ones, month after month without them ever realizing it's happening. So in this video, I'm going to break down exactly how your credit score actually works, the real weighted formula behind it. And then we're going to go through the most common myths I hear about credit, one by one, and correct each one with what's actually true. My name is Steve, and if you've ever stared at your credit score with zero idea what actually changed it, make sure to hit subscribe because by the end of this video, that number is going to stop feeling like a mystery and start feeling like something you can actually control. Let's start with the real formula. Most credit scores in the US, including the widely used FICO score, are built from 5 weighted categories, and understanding the actual weighting changes everything about how you should prioritize your habits. The first and largest factor is payment history, making up roughly 35% of your score. This is simply whether you've paid your bills on time, not how much you paid, not how much you owe, just whether the payment showed up by the due date. This single factor carries more weight than almost everyone realizes, which is exactly why one missed payment can do more damage than people expect, and why a long streak of on-time payments is the single most powerful thing you can build. The second factor is amounts owed, more specifically your credit utilization, making up roughly 30% of your score. This is the percentage of your available credit that you're actually using. If you have a $10,000 total credit limit across your cards and you're carrying a $3,000 balance, your utilization is 30%. This factor gets misunderstood constantly, and we're going to spend real time on it in the myths section because the misunderstandings here are costing people the most points. The third factor is length of credit history, roughly 15% of your score. This looks at how long your accounts have existed, both your oldest account and the average age across all your accounts. This is the factor most people have the least direct control over in the short term because it simply requires time. The fourth factor is credit mix, roughly 10% of your score. This looks at whether you have experience managing different types of credit cards, an auto loan, a mortgage, and so on. It's a relatively small factor, but it does exist, and it explains why having only one type of credit account can slightly cap your score compared to someone with a healthy mix. The fifth factor is new credit, roughly 10% of your score. This looks at how many new accounts you've recently opened and how many hard inquiries have hit your report. Opening several new accounts in a short window signals higher risk to lenders, which is why this factor exists even though it's the smallest slice of the formula. So that's the real breakdown. Payment history, the biggest piece by far. Utilization, the second biggest and the most misunderstood. Length of history, credit mix, and new credit filling out the rest. Now that you have the actual formula, let's go through the myths, because once you see how they compare to this real weighting, you'll immediately understand why they've been quietly costing people points. Myth number 1. Carrying a balance improves your score. This is one of the most common credit myths out there, and it's completely backwards. Some people believe that leaving a small balance on their card instead of paying it off in full every month shows lenders you're using credit responsibly and helps your score. It doesn't. Your utilization is calculated based on your balance at whatever moment your card issuer reports to the credit bureaus, typically your statement closing date, not whether you eventually pay it off. Carrying a balance doesn't help your score, it just costs you interest, while your utilization percentage sits exactly where it would if you'd paid in full. The myth probably persists because people confuse using a credit card regularly with carrying a balance, but those are two completely different things. You can use your card constantly and pay it off in full every month, and your score will be just fine, often better. Myth number 2, Checking your own credit score hurts it. This one causes a lot of unnecessary anxiety, and it's flat out false in the way most people worry about it. There are two types of credit inquiries: soft inquiries and hard inquiries. When you check your own score through a banking app or a free credit monitoring service, that's a soft inquiry, and soft inquiries have zero impact on your score. Hard inquiries happen when a lender checks your credit because you're actually applying for new credit, a new card, a loan, a mortgage. Those can cause a small temporary dip, but simply checking your own number as often as you want is completely safe, and honestly, it's one of the best habits you can build because you can't fix what you're not tracking. Myth number 3. Closing an old credit card always helps your score, or always hurts it. This one's tricky because the real answer is it depends, which is exactly why it gets oversimplified into an absolute rule. Closing a card can hurt your score for two reasons, connected directly to the real formula we just covered. First, it reduces your total available credit, which can raise your utilization percentage even if your spending hasn't changed at all. Second, if it's one of your oldest accounts, closing it can eventually shorten your average length of credit history, hitting that 15% factor. But closing a newer card with a small limit that you genuinely never use, that's a much smaller impact. The real lesson isn't never close a card. It's understand which two factors closing a card actually affects before you do it. Myth number 4. You need to be in debt to have a good credit score. This myth causes a lot of confusion, especially for people trying to build credit from scratch. What actually matters is having a track record of accounts that are used and paid on time, not carrying ongoing debt. You can have an excellent credit score while paying your full balance every single month and never paying a cent of interest. The score rewards demonstrated responsible repayment behavior over time, not the existence of a balance. This myth likely comes from the fact that people with zero credit history, meaning no accounts at all, do have lower scores simply because there's nothing for the formula to evaluate yet, which gets misinterpreted as debt equals good credit, when really it's usage history equals good credit. Myth number 5, and this one connects directly to an objection I hear constantly. If utilization matters so much, should I just never use my card? I understand why people land here after learning how much weight utilization carries, but this actually creates a different problem. Remember, credit mix and payment history both require you to actually use credit accounts over time to build a track record. If you stop using your cards entirely, you're not lowering your utilization to a great number. You're just failing to build the usage history the formula also rewards. The better approach, and this is where the real strategy comes in, is using your card normally for purchases you'd make anyway, and paying it off in full before the statement closes, keeping your reported utilization low without ever carrying a balance or avoiding usage altogether. Now that we've cleared up the myths, let's talk about how to actually improve your score efficiently, prioritized by the real weighting we covered earlier. 4 steps. Step 1. Since payment history is 35% of your score, the single biggest lever, automate every minimum payment on every account you have. Not because minimum payments are ideal, they're not, but because this single step protects the largest slice of your score from ever taking an accidental hit due to a forgotten due date. This is the same automation principle we've talked about on this channel before, removing the need for in-the-moment willpower. Step 2. Since utilization is 30% of your score, the second biggest lever, aim to keep your reported utilization under 30% and ideally under 10% if you can manage it, across all your cards combined. If you're carrying higher utilization right now, prioritize paying that down before worrying about smaller factors like credit mix. This is genuinely the fastest lever most people can pull for a meaningful score improvement in a short window, because unlike length of history, it can change within a single billing cycle. Step 3. Since length of history is 15% of your score and requires time rather than action, the best move here is simply patience combined with caution. Don't close your oldest accounts unless there's a real reason to, like an unavoidable annual fee you can't justify. Time is quietly working in your favor here as long as you don't interrupt it. Step 4. Since new credit is only 10% of your score, avoid opening several new accounts in a short window, especially right before a major application like a mortgage, where lenders will be looking closely at recent activity. But don't let fear of this smaller factor stop you from occasionally opening credit when it genuinely makes sense, since it's the smallest slice of the formula, not the largest. Let me walk you through how this actually looks for someone real. I'll call her Elena. Elena had believed several of these myths for years without realizing it. She routinely carried a small balance on her main credit card, genuinely believing it helped her score. She also avoided checking her own credit report because she'd heard it might hurt her, so she had no real visibility into what was actually happening. When she finally looked into how the formula really worked, she made three specific changes. First, she started paying her statement balance in full every month instead of carrying it forward, which didn't cost her anything extra, since she'd just been paying interest on that carried balance for no benefit anyway. Second, she started checking her credit report monthly through a free monitoring service using the safe, soft inquiry method, so she could actually track what was moving her number. Third, she requested a credit limit increase on her oldest card, which combined with paying off her balance in full, dropped her overall utilization from around 42% down to under 15%. Within 2 billing cycles, her score had climbed 34 points, not from some dramatic overhaul, but from correcting a handful of myth-driven habits that had quietly been working against her utilization score for years. 6 months later, with consistent on-time payments and utilization staying low, her score had climbed an additional 19 points on top of that. Nothing about her income changed. Nothing about her spending habits changed dramatically. She just stopped operating on myths and started operating on the actual formula. That's the entire point of understanding how this works. Your credit score was never actually a mystery. It's a weighted formula with 5 clearly defined factors. And once you know which ones matter most, you can stop guessing and start making decisions that actually move the number in the direction you want. So let's recap the real formula. Payment history, roughly 35%, the biggest factor by far. Utilization, roughly 30%, the second biggest and most commonly misunderstood. Length of history, roughly 15%. Credit mix, roughly 10%. New credit, roughly 10%. And let's recap the myths we busted. Carrying a balance doesn't help your score, it just costs you interest. Checking your own score through a soft inquiry never hurts it. Closing a card isn't automatically good or bad. It depends on your utilization and account age. You don't need to be in debt to have great credit. You need a track record of on-time, responsible usage. And avoiding your card entirely isn't the fix for utilization concerns. Using it normally and paying in full is. Here's the truth most people never get told clearly. Your credit score isn't judging your character, and it's definitely not some mysterious black box reacting randomly to your life. It's a mechanical formula responding predictably to 5 specific inputs. Once you actually understand those inputs, the number stops feeling like something that happens to you and starts feeling like something you're actively steering. If this cleared up how your credit score actually works, hit subscribe because that's exactly the kind of practical, no-fluff explanation this channel is built on. And I'm genuinely curious, which of these myths did you actually believe before watching this? Let me know in the comments because I guarantee you're not the only one.